All right, guys, I'm here with Daniel Fletcher, Dan Fletcher to me.
Hmm.
Dan is someone that I studied 4 years of design with. We both have a degree from the Uni of New South Wales College of Fine Arts. And we
Yep,
both graduated at the same time, 96, if I'm right.
that sounds right.
And that sounds
Long
right.
time
And
ago.
I think it's one of those weird situations where for me personally, I always lived close to the city. And then when I found out there was a university that was literally like a bicycle ride away from where I lived with my parents still at that time, I thought this is going to be fucking mad. I'm going to meet all these people that live close by. And then I meet you, and you live miles away, and I meet Simon, who lives in Glen Innes, and it was so
Right.
weird. Like the initial people that I met were all from far away,
Yeah.
and you were one of the first. Like you, Dom, and Simon, I just gravitated towards. Like we just started hanging out,
Yeah. Well,
pretty
I think
much.
we were really lucky. We had a really great group of people. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, there's always a few kind of, a few oddballs in any art course, but that makes it interesting. And, from other people's point of view, that would have been us. So, but it
True.
was a pretty awesome group of people. And what a cool thing to do. Like, I feel like we were at the beginning of all of that era of kind of design and it becoming really kind of popular, and particularly with the advent
Yeah.
of computers, we were using the Apple IIe and all of
Well,
those old
we
iMacs
weren't
and stuff.
allowed to. Do you remember we weren't allowed to use computers until halfway through the course? Really?
That's right. Yeah, you had to get down all the old school skills first, and then they said, "Now you can have a try at doing some graphics." And
You you
I've got
you
a
you,
really
you were a
strong.
you were a larger than life character because I remembered in one of our drawing classes, which we did a lot of, by the way. We did a lot of drawing and folding
Mhm.
paper, and do you remember folding paper and weird stuff? And Eileen
Hours.
Slark was our lecturer, and I think you might have even been late. This is how much of a character you were in my eyes, anyway, right? So everyone's there, and she's gotten everyone to huddle around the front of the studio, and she's gone and you've just ducked in the door and you were late. And she's just gone, so put your hands up if you can draw. And you've just ducked in and your hand just went up straight away. I can draw.
Well, if you're going to be late, you may as well make an entrance.
but,
I was late
but
quite a lot because I lived out of town, and it took me about an hour to get into uni some days, and the trains were not the best. But
yeah,
I
they were
think
strict on us, man. Like you're bang on. I think we were the second year ever to graduate from that course. So it
mhm.
was early days. And I remember them being so strict with us that if you skipped a day, if you skipped like 4 or 5 days, you'd be out.
Yeah.
And I think we started with something like 80 students and ended up with 40 or something like that.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of people who kind of made it right the way through.
No,
Um,
it was difficult.
yeah, I remember the reason I kind of ended up there was because it it was because of my art teacher, my high school art teacher, but initially it was because I'd always wanted to go to acting school, and
Okay,
I
I didn't know
was
that.
yeah, it was always the plan,
Mm,
and
mm,
but I was kind of for my age, I think I was quite, young. I was still very young minded. I don't think I had the life experience that I would have needed to go to acting school. I think I just
right.
probably would have gotten eaten up and it wouldn't have worked. And so my folks and family and everyone kind of quite rightly said to me, "Oh, well, you better do something else. Have something to fall back on." And so, of course, I went to art school. Like that's the good fallback option. Um,
Well,
but my
design was something that was tied in with money at that time
Oh
because
yeah, it was.
if you just did painting or something, there's no money in it. But I think that was the same thing for
Exactly.
me too. It was kind of like, rather than do painting, Justin, why don't you do this new thing called graphic design, and you might
Yeah,
actually make
exactly.
some money.
And so there was that, kind of that the money idea as well, I think, which, I did do some design work for a short time before I then went into started doing my acting. But it was
Hmm.
my high school art teacher who actually went to COFA, and she did fine art and art teaching.
Okay.
And she said, "Well, you you should apply for there. It's very difficult to get in, so don't be upset if it doesn't happen. And
Yeah,
that's when I
yeah.
kind of went, of course I'm going to get in. Fuck you.
you
There you go.
you just had like, man, you had so much energy. Like you were a hyper person. Like you're just constantly on the move, constantly cracking jokes. You're just like
Yeah.
the life of the party kind of guy. Like I just remembered
Well, not a lot has
your
changed over the years, but I think learned to, I've learned to channel it into my work rather than just let it, kind of do its own thing.
you've changed, man. Like with these shows, sometimes I do a little bit of, a little bit of a stalk on Facebook, see what people are posting, have a
Yeah,
look at what these guys are doing. I mean, I do like to just go off the cuff and see where these recordings go, but
cool.
I totally intended to do that with you. But then the Google was there, and there was a blinking cursor, and I typed in your name, and I found. Let me just see. I found a page on Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, the musical,
Uh-huh.
and there was a really nice professional photo of you on the left there with the background nice and blurry and creamy. And my God, the text, you've gotten to a point where if someone was to introduce you to like a speaking position or something,
Uh-huh.
they would have a very hard time trying to condense this humongous list of achievements into a quick intro. They would be sitting there for like 5 minutes before you actually get the microphone.
Well, that's nice to think of it that way, but I kind of just am been too busy doing what I do. Do you know what I mean? Like you just go on a
Yeah.
mission and you just keep going, and then suddenly you've gone, oh, actually, I've done quite a bit of stuff now. That's
You've
cool.
done so much, man. Like I honestly didn't even know. Like I think one of the last times, like honestly, I haven't seen you in I don't know how many years. Like
It's been a
I
while. I
I
have a
know
memory of you and Dom and I going to play pool like in Coogee or something.
something random, yeah, like that. That would have been
Random like that.
how like
It would have been
oh
15 years ago,
yeah,
easy,
yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
longer.
Yeah, and I do remember speaking to you. Maybe I was in Melbourne hanging out with Dom once, and we almost teed up something, but you then got a gig. It was definitely overseas.
Right.
You were seeing you were in a relationship with someone that was in the cast, and you were super happy, and you were doing a big part, and that's when I knew like, holy shit, this guy has gone from like I saw you on a Holden ad on TV. That's where I did see you. I saw you on advertisements on
The
TV.
infamous Holden ad. Yeah,
Well, before that was the Good Guys ad, right? Which was so you because you're always singing too. That's oh my God. I
it
just
was
remembered
silly.
us going to karaoke and you singing Living on a Prayer, and you could actually reach the notes.
Well, that's good. That's helpful when you have to sing for a living.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I know, like, I used to sing in a rock band, right? And I couldn't
Yeah.
reach those notes that he sings. So just
Yeah, but
seeing
it didn't
you
matter because you guys
contort
were
your
really cool, so it didn't matter.
but but yeah, I think that show that I heard that you were in at that time might have been Rock of Ages. I think that's
No,
probably
no, it would have been maybe We Will Rock You.
oh,
I don't
okay,
think the
okay.
shows with rock in the title now, except
Yeah,
for School of
yeah,
Rock.
yeah, yeah, right. But I mean, one of these stats says that you've done over 1,000 shows in that one show. Like 1,000's pretty major, man. Like that's a
Yeah, it's a
lot
lot.
of shows.
Yeah, it's that probably would have been Rock of Ages. I was doing that. Uh, I did it on the West End in London, and then I did it on a UK tour. So that's about kind of nearly 3 years of your life just there, and you're doing 8 shows a week. For that amount of time, it tends to add up pretty quickly. And then I did a couple of other tours and took it out onto the cruise ships because now they're doing this thing
Damn.
where uh, they take these kind of West End and Broadway shows. Well, they used to pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, it'll all
Mm-hmm.
come back. But
Mm.
because those ships have to, be able to compete with the level of entertainment on land, they just
Yep.
decided at a certain point, well, listen, we'll just take these same productions and put them straight onto the ship. And the good
Yep.
thing is the ships have billions of dollars, so they can just make it, sometimes better than the version that you might see on the land, and at least equal to that.
Well,
Um,
okay.
and they don't have to have the problem of getting those box office receipts because they know that it's all paid for. The
They're all
cu-
there.
the clients, the passengers are going to come and see it. So, it's a done deal. So they just
Hmm.
started putting these ships, the shows straight onto the ships, and so then it's great because it became another level of opportunity for all of the entertainers who do that sort of stuff to go, well, actually, that show can have a little bit of a life after, the tour that I've done, or after that, if I just continue to do it on the ship for a little bit. So that was actually really fun, and I got to go out there and do that a couple of times, and that was a dream gig actually, because the ship that Rock of Ages was on was the Norwegian Breakaway, and it only went from New York to Bermuda and back again. So
Damn.
each week you'd have new passengers get on in New York. I'd have a full Sunday in New York, walking around, seeing friends, do my thing, full day off, so you could go and have a lunch or do whatever you wanted to do. And
Mm.
then we'd go to Bermuda and a couple of days at sea. Then we'd be there for 2.5 days, spend 2 days in Bermuda, just on the beach, cliff diving, doing whatever you want to do, and then back again. It was
Do you,
it was brilliant.
do you find as well then in a situation that's more like contained, like on a ship, when you're not working, people on the boat recognize you and you get a good vibe there as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. It was always a little fun thing because you'd have the shows would generally be on at the end of that cruise. So if they
Yep.
got on a Sunday, the shows would be like a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That's the other thing because you're not working every night either. So we're only
Right.
doing
Okay.
five shows a week
Yeah. Sure.
uh,
Sure. That makes
on the
sense.
ship.
Yeah.
So it was even less work, which is quite nice. Uh, but you'd have like three or 4 days of kind of anonymity when people first got on
Right.
the ship, and you'd just
Right.
walk around and you'd enjoy the fact that no one kind of knew who
Yeah.
you were, because you knew on the Thursday you'd be getting stopped everywhere going, oh, you're the guy from the gym, yeah, go, let's have a
But
photo, let me buy a
that's
ticket.
like an almost like an after party for you too, right? It's
Yeah,
kind of like that had that sort of end of the trip vibes.
yeah, but it was always nice, and people were always, very nice and complimentary about the show, and I think too with that show, it was just such a good time that people
Mm.
loved it. Like I never met anyone who didn't say that was a lot of fun.
It's
You know,
more than a concert, I think. It's like a concert's a concert, sure, it's great, but especially if you're in a concert where you don't know every song, it almost feels like work sometimes to sit through an entire set. Whereas
yeah,
with what you do, there's a beginning, middle, and an end, and you're taking these people on a journey. So
yeah, and I
probably
think
they
the
probably
thing that
feel like they get to know you a little bit more than if you were just
yeah,
in a concert.
absolutely. Well, if you, yeah, at the very least, they kind of know the story, and they get
Mm,
familiar with the characters, and they can kind of
mm,
relate to parts of that. But I think part of the fun of those sort of jukebox musicals, as they are, is that you're always looking for how the well-known song is going to be worked into the kind of script. And if it's
right.
done in a clever way, or a fun way, or an unexpected way, then it's always a nice little surprise. So that's
That's
always
awesome.
that's always good fun.
Man, a question with the with gigging, like doing so many shows per week. I've always wondered, like, obviously with my rock band, I never made it to a point where you'd be playing like stadiums or playing so many different countries, and I always wondered what it'd be like to just say one of the songs is emotional, and if you played it every night, whether that actually destroys you a little bit because just say you're singing a song that like you need to get into character, you need to feel a certain emotion for it, and then
Yeah,
you're doing it over and over and over again. It could get pretty hardcore on just your mental state. Like, I mean, how do you find that? Because obviously there's performances that you do that you put so much into, but how do you find having to do that so many times?
yeah, it is a thing, I think. luckily, a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff I've done has just been really good fun. So
Fun. Okay,
I've
yeah,
not, I've,
yeah.
I've not had to do that very often. But when you've got stuff that is like heavy going, like particularly like with like plays or things like that, you
Yep.
you've got to know that for a period of time it is, if you are actually going to go there, which you should, if you're trying to give a really kind of honest and believable performance of anything, then
Correct, yeah.
it will kind of, you will have to go through those emotions, but the idea is just to do it and then to be able to let it go. And I think that's, that's the important thing. But obviously you have echoes of it, particularly if you've got a show that, or a song, or part of a, a part of a performance where you have to go to those kind of, heavy, dark, emotional places,
Mm.
then it will affect you. And sometimes it just takes a minute, certainly, just to kind of come down out of that, like after a show,
Yep.
and I guess that's probably why, a lot of actors kind of like to have a drink or a smoke or whatever after a show, because it's like, right, now I need to decompress, because you actually do go through a period of a few hours where you are experiencing those heightened emotions,
Hmm.
you know, every night, even if it's just the heightened joy of going, wow, there's 2,500 people going nuts for this
Even
performance.
just
Like,
that, even yeah, like even if you are just doing happy music and you're on that, I mean, it's like if you're taking drugs, you have an ecstasy tablet, you're gonna have a bad Wednesday when the middle of next week where what it goes up has to come down, right? So
yeah,
so actually you're right. It doesn't even pertain to just emotional performances, but even if you're on that much of a high at the end of every performance, like you must have
yeah,
to
I
have
think,
a pretty chill day the next day, like, or start your morning off slowly at least.
yeah, you learn to manage your energy in terms of like what expectations you put on yourself, and the expectations of the performance. But
Mm,
if I can kind of go a little bit technical, wanky acting for a minute,
sure.
it's
Excuse me.
emotions aren't designed to be hung on to. They're designed to kind of travel through you, and
Go
and
through you,
and
yeah. Okay.
be there and arrive and then go. And there's one understanding of the word emotion, which means energy in motion, as a an idea of how that, the etymology of that word. um, so you get better at letting that arrive and then letting it go. Hopefully you do. I mean, that's
Well,
kind of the
that's an
goal.
acting. You're talking about acting now because
Yeah,
that obviously that's what you have to do, right? Like I've seen, I love what I love about YouTube is if you dig deep enough, you can find a lot of B reel and you can find a lot of like people doing acting parts and not getting it right because maybe they're almost too in character, too emotional.
yeah, or
And
overthinking it or something.
right, and as soon as they sort of strip it back and it's almost like a less is more sometimes. It's more
Yeah,
emotional to be breathing a certain way rather than saying something.
yeah,
And
and it's the
little
same with
nuances
singing.
like that.
It's the
Mm.
same with singing, because, well, I mean, not anyone who kind of, if you watch any singer that maybe you really admire, or someone who always gives quite an emotional performance, they've got
Hmm.
an uncanny ability to just connect to the lyric, and they'll do it. A lot of them, it's not a cerebral thing. They just know how to do it because that's where they have to go to give that truthful, honest performance. And that gives them what they need to sing the notes that they need. So it's all that old kind of head, heart, mind, body thing. It's all connected. And
Mm.
so particularly with like musicals and things like that, when you do have to act through the song, and you're trying to tell a story, you've got to connect to those emotions, and that's hopefully what makes it more truthful. And if you get that, then hopefully you've kind of done a good job. Does that,
Well,
does
a
that
lot of
make
the
sense?
time, like if you were the person that wrote the song and you have a certain emotion to it, but then when you look at the crowd and it's like maybe a whole bunch of young kids holding their lighters up, there is a disconnect sometimes where the crowd is a little bit like that's the hit single. Like for example, like when I saw Eric Clapton live, quite a few years ago now, but he did a one more around the world kind of tour, and he
Hmm.
came out to Sydney, played at Darling Harbour, and the entire crowd was screaming for him to play Tears in Heaven, which is a song about his son dying. and he just refused to fucking play it. And I love that he did, because he just wanted to have fun. He was shredding, and he had his mates there doing guitar solos all night, just
Yeah.
playing songs that no one knew. And I really like that he was there to have a good time,
Yeah,
and and he just
I
ignored the
totally
crowd.
agree with that. I totally agree with that because, you know, that song was a really personal statement for him, and the
Right.
fact that he had to put that into song, and then the fact that it had its success, they're kind of two separate things.
Yeah.
So for him to want to share that, you know, it's got to be the right time and place, and it's certainly not going to be when you've got all these young kids going, "Come on,
Like,
turn it up."
but look,
It kind of doesn't work.
do you think, like, I had to ask this question at some point or another, but do you think
Mhm.
that the 4 years in design school was more for you than just 4 years of growing up, and that you've actually managed to take some of the processes that we learned and bring it onto the stage? Like,
Yeah,
do you
absolutely.
find any relation and anything that you've developed at university, and how has it helped you in what you're doing today and what you have been doing for the last 15 years?
Yeah, well, there was a common saying that I heard somewhere along the line. It was like, you know, it doesn't matter what degree you do, just do a degree because you'll learn about life. And I think that held true for, you know, a, a lot of things. But I think because it's an art-based and communication-based degree
Mm,
anyway,
mm.
the crossover became pretty clear, you know, pretty early on. So if I think about it, and I knew you wanted to talk about this, so I kind of tried to put my
You
thoughts
picture,
together on this a little bit.
yeah,
Um,
because it is abstract, but it's not at the same time.
yeah,
But yeah, like,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'd probably say first up that while the techniques of creating might be slightly different, or you might arrive at them slightly differently, I think a lot of the ideologies are the same. So in terms of let's just talk about, like, if you were creating a character for, or trying to, you know, get into a character for a show or something.
Hmm.
So you 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 have, like, in design, you have like an exploration and kind of research period where you first find out what it is you're going to work on. So you have a bit of an explore, and you just see, all right, what's this about, and, you know, what am I trying to do here? And that's definitely the same for creating any sort of character. You go and explore, and you use, you know, that inquisitive nature that I think we all developed at university to try and
Mm.
find what it is that you're going to hang this whole kind of thing on. And even if it's just learning a little bit more about this person or this concept, and trying to, you know, discover what it is that makes them tick, or how they work, or what it is that makes them, you know, kind of gets them excited, or, you know, all of that stuff. So I think the first kind of thing is that doing that kind of detailed research on what it is that you're actually trying to make. And that even goes as far as, like, understanding, you know, in a more kind of universal sense, what the production is that you're working on, you know, who the director is, what their style is, just kind of gathering all the information.
Yep. Which
And then,
everyone would do differently too, right? Just like designers, everyone would have different skill levels at doing that, even, or
yeah,
different ways of researching and different ways of filling in a character.
yeah. But I think where the design degree really kind of helped out was that, you know, there were always those moments where we would come up with, you know, say our 20 thumbnail sketches, or our next 20 thumbnail sketches, or however many of those fucking things we had to
My
do.
God, yeah,
And
yeah.
then they would say, that's great, do some more. You go,
Right. It was tough. Hey, the more I think about it, like, I
yeah,
honestly haven't gone there in my head, but even you just mentioning thumbnails just then, like, for people who are listening and don't know what thumbnails are, we really weren't allowed to hop on computers back then. So if you
no,
were designing a magazine cover or something like that, you would spend a little bit of time to crack out the ruler and the pencil and draw these boxes that were all exactly the same size in
Hmm.
your art book, and you would draw pages of those, and then you would start filling them in with really rough thumbnail concepts of
Yeah.
what you were thinking. And now you would hop straight on the computer. People are throwing photos in there straight away, typography, but we were doing
Hmm.
it all by pencil.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were
And
put through the ringer basically, but damn, like in
absolutely.
retrospect, I think it was so good for us, right?
Yeah, I
So
couldn't agree more. And I think that that kind of pushing,
mm,
excuse me, is one of the other things in terms of doing that research where you, because whenever you get a project, someone comes to you with a design brief, or someone says,
mm,
I've got this idea of something I want to make or whatever, or someone says, hey, you've been cast in this role, here's the character. You always have an instinct, you always have a moment where you go, actually, I think it's this. But that research period of going, right, well, what other options are there? What other ways of doing this are there? And so you push yourself to hopefully find the kind of best solution or the best version of that you can find.
and it
And I
might not
think
be
that
necessarily the first solution. That's the thing, right?
exactly, yeah.
Mm,
So and that kind of leads me to the second bit of this kind of creating a character design actor crossover thing,
mm.
which was we had drummed into us, very early on, that God is in the detail. That it's always about those little finesses, those little things, the details that you can add, or the things that you don't add. Knowing where to stop. That's also detailing.
It's a big one, yeah.
The nuance of it all, and so that all contributes to your aesthetic. The way that you create this thing, the way it looks, and so the look of the whole thing, the look of this character, even if it's the way they speak or their costuming or any of that sort of stuff, um, that becomes your detailing work. And so then knowing that again, the techniques of getting there might be different, but the concept is the same, that you've got to create this thing. So how are you going to build it? And you're essentially building it onto yourself. So
Yep.
with the costume, with the if there's a lot of physical acting that needs to be done, whether that kind of manifests itself in the way you walk or speak or whatever. So all of that detail stuff then comes into it. And then the third thing, which I think is the kind of overarching idea for all of this, is that all of it's communication. So connecting that back to what we were saying before about the emotion of songs and expressing those to an audience, all of this, whether it's presenting an advertising campaign to someone, whether it's getting up and singing a song, whether it's painting a picture, you're trying to communicate something. And the better that you can communicate that, the better job you've done. And in hand with that, like what you said before, is there's so many different ways of doing it.
Mm,
So there's so many different ways of saying the same line. There's so
yeah.
many different ways of singing the same song. And it's just finding the way that works for you and
Do you have that
trying to,
flexibility in general? Like, obviously not all the time, but do you, I mean, sometimes
when it
have
comes to
that
a performance or when it
yeah,
comes
yeah,
to,
yeah. I mean, like, do you find that like every single performance you say exactly the same words of the script, or do you find
if it's
sometimes
like a big franchised show, like
ah
something like Nehemiah's or something like Phantom of the Opera, or anything that maybe has a blueprint that gets sent around the world, you
mm,
don't have the same freedom to do what you want with it as you might
fair
be
fair
able to
enough
with
because
something
it's
else,
yeah,
because they're protecting an identity and things like that. And so
yes, yeah,
those sorts of things, while they're still very enjoyable and can be lots of fun and good to work on. Uh, I don't find that way of working anywhere near as enjoyable as where you get to kind of trust your instincts and try different things and
of
have
course.
a bit more fun with it. But what you do end up doing is you end up playing with the spaces in between. So the bits that aren't kind of locked away and locked off, and you just kind of see how far you can kind of push all of the other stuff to keep it interesting. But it's always slightly different from night to night anyway, even on things like that, because you're interacting with real human beings, and
That's
so
it.
whilst
Yeah.
the audience might not see, the kind of the nuances of the changes that happen on stage, it happens between the actors and the musicians and the crew and all of that
There's
stuff.
so
And so
many
that,
moving parts, man. That's the thing. Like I saw a little YouTube video of behind the scenes of I think it might have been Rock of Ages, and just seeing like you doing your bit, but then there's all these people next to you doing their bit and dancing behind you, synchronized, but that's just
yeah,
off to your left, and then you've got this thing onto your right, and it's like there's so many moving parts going on at the same time.
yeah.
It,
Well,
it,
and
it,
that's
it
the other kind of design thing of it as well, which I think has been really helpful for me, is that you, you have a greater appreciation, I think. Well, I mean, obviously everyone would at some point, but I think initially I had a greater appreciation of the kind of how all of the moving parts kind of worked together to create this one big
Sure.
thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
everything's a picture, everything's a picture. If it's a dance number, it's a picture. There's a moment that you're trying to hit. If it's a lighting state, it's all got to work together to kind of focus one particular moment.
Mm.
Then you add the music, and so in terms of like an art form, musicals are very complicated, but also very specific because there are so many moving parts. And so it is like working on this massive kind of big, well-oiled machine when it
Mhm.
works
Mhm.
well,
Mhm.
and you don't see everything that's backstage kind of happening. The best fun is when something goes wrong and then you've got to keep the
Right.
machine moving without the audience knowing. That's always a lot of fun. And
That's
also,
insane.
people
I'd
shit
imagine
themselves.
you just get good at that. Like you cannot stop, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
crazy. Like,
People, it's good because you see people's kind of instincts kick in, and it's almost like if you had a fire drill or something, at a theme park or what, like people just know what to do. So
just
you've
kicks
always
in, yeah.
got you've always got someone who is the dance captain who looks after. Uh, well, they look after, first and foremost the choreography and maintaining that in the show. But they're the ones that kind of you always look to if something falls apart, because they know how the show will work if one of the pieces falls off. One of
Mm.
the dancers can't work, or one of the actors isn't going to be able to do their next part of their track, and so they say, right, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, and it all kind of happens behind the scenes, usually pretty seamlessly without the audience
Yeah.
knowing a single thing. So it's pretty amazing. Those guys
That's pretty cool.
don't get paid enough.
No, no, that's pretty cool. One thing that I've been watching a little bit of lately is these like Hollywood roundtable um, podcasts, and they get like big A-list celebrities on there, and just have something a lot like this, just an open discussion.
Mhm.
And these guys are, they're in your Marvel films, or they're in all your Hollywood blockbusters. But when they're asked about their favorite moments or their favorite things to do, it's not Hollywood movies, it's musicals, it's plays, and it's theater. And it's
Yeah,
like all of them, them from the Hollywood films, but their highlights in their careers and what they miss the most is kind of what you're doing. So
yeah.
do you find that you in a position where you're not at all trying to progress to be maybe in a Hollywood film one day and being a big time actor and doing all that schmoozy stuff, and or do you feel like you found your lane kind of thing in what you're doing now, and it's almost like reversing what they're saying, like do you feel like there's a part of you that wants to go and do all of that acting kind of
Well,
movie stuff? And
I think what I'm actually working on a film project at the moment, which hopefully, will all be going ahead. It's difficult to know in these times, but I've
sure.
been working on something that is going to happen in the next couple of months. So that's good. And I think that opportunity's only really come around because when you're doing long running shows, you're kind of locked into something for, you know, sometimes 12 months, sometimes a couple of years, sometimes shorter amounts of time. But so then it's difficult to kind of get seen for auditions for things like film and TV, and and particularly in the UK, you know, sometimes if you're working in the music theatre world, and people kind of have this idea of what you do because they're only seeing you do that all the time.
Right.
So sometimes it's kind of, you know, where the road meets opportunity kind of thing. But having said that, like I understand why those guys would talk about, you know, the fondness of doing musicals and plays and things, because in film you don't have the immediacy of that response with the live audience, because
That's
it's
it.
films
They
are much
mention
more
that all the time.
technical. Films are much more technical experience, and so while you still get, you know, that joy of kind of doing that acting and of creating that stuff, it's a very different experience to doing something live. And, you know, like you said earlier on, you know, I'm a bit of a show off. I like to get on stage and make
Yeah, for
people laugh,
sure.
and, you know,
You must be like the you that I know would be so in their element on stage. Like I'll actually
yeah,
have to
fun.
see one of your shows at some point, because just I just know that you would be lit and totally connected, and you
It
know.
is, yeah. It's the cool thing about it. I think one of the coolest things is that you, once you've done this sort of stuff for long enough, you get to learn how to read an audience pretty quickly. And even though
Yeah.
it's a different group of people every night, they kind of tend to behave in similar ways because they've come to an environment to experience something. So, you know, there's kind of a protocol, there's an understanding between the people on stage and the people in the audience.
Mm,
And and you get to a point where you can kind of have a lot of fun with, like, you know, finessing or manipulating a moment, particularly if it's a gag, or, you know that there's a wonderful kind of thing coming up that they're going to enjoy, and just
that's
even
awesome.
watching them enjoy those moments, it's a real buzz. You know, you don't get that anywhere else. You certainly don't get that in a
Yeah,
film.
it
You get
reminds
the
me like
satisfaction.
yeah, no,
I
go
was
on, sorry.
just gonna say, you get the satisfaction of having created that, or kind of hit those marks, or making something, you know, that you feel you've really done a good job, hopefully, of telling the story, or you know, creating that world.
I think
But you
that's the
just don't have
addiction,
that.
right? Like I think I remember hearing um some actors saying that the rehearsals are such hard work because there's no crowd there. So you're rehearsing, and there's no energy coming back except
Yeah.
for someone yelling at you and saying that's wrong or that's right or do it again or whatever. But then
Well, it
like
depends on the director,
these
but yeah,
guys are
that happens.
saying as soon as you're just absolutely bursting at the seams, you cannot wait for the first night, which is apparently the most nerve-wracking. The first night, do you find that like the first night of the show is
Yeah, I
like,
mean, yeah, it is always nerve-wracking. I think that there's definitely a thing called the second show blues, when you've had the first night, which is always kind of, you know, you've all been really hyped up, and then the second show, you feel like everything is shit because you've just had
that's
this
cool, that's
huge kind of
interesting.
hyped up experience, and then
Mm.
you go in again, you're like, oh, it didn't work, or try this, or you push too hard, or you kind of, you know, you just kind of get in your head about everything because you might be thinking, you know, why isn't it working the way that it was? But there's usually so much hype around the first night that, you know, it's not generally a great indication of where things should sit. And it takes, it's like anything, it takes a couple of weeks to kind of, for everything to sit and to find its flow. And then the thing that happens is the performance actually grows over time, because
Yeah,
you find different different moments, or they just kind of grow and evolve, and they become more complex, hopefully, and, you know, and create more of a dimension to the show, which is why, you know, I kind of always like to wait a couple of months before I go and see something, because, you know, it will be really kind of sat and worn in by that stage, and everyone will just be right on their game, you know.
geez, that's good advice for people who are
Yeah.
looking to see a show. That's actually, you know, coming straight from the horse's mouth. That's a good that's a good tip off.
Yeah.
But
You don't have to wait until the end of the run, but
yeah.
sometimes give them a few weeks to get into their stride, hit their stride is not a bad idea.
Look, I saw one of these roundtables, and Jim Carrey and Sacha Baron Cohen were on the same table, and
Brilliant.
Sacha's a huge Jim Carrey fan, but Jim Carrey was trying to say to Sacha, "I'm actually a huge fan of yours," and I had to decide whether I was going to be hateful and jealous of you or whether I'm just going to admire you. So he chose to admire Sacha. So that was a really sweet little exchange. But Sasha was saying that his highlights were also in theater, not doing the Ali G and stuff, but like he started out in this really dark sort of theater where he had a specific name for it. I don't remember what it was, but the idea is that for the first half of the show, he makes you fall in love with, or with they make you fall in love with a character,
Uh-huh.
and then for the second half of the show, they kill the character off. So the first half is to butter you up. And he said that what he loved about doing it live was he would see these puffs of white pop up. It took him a while to realize they're all hankies and tissues from people crying in the second half. And he just see like tufts of white
Amazing.
appear in front of him. And I thought that was just a beautiful way to say it, because you can see how that audience reaction is affecting you whilst you're on the stage. This is live. This is not like take one,
Yeah.
take two.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I,
I
I
think
think that's powerful.
it's hugely powerful. And in terms of like the world that we're living in at the moment with this pandemic, I think it's
Mm,
important to remember that, theater is a place where people kind of go to experience all of those things. They go for healing. They go for that shared experience. They go to find joy. There are so many stories that I've had of people who've come and seen things, and not just me, but all of the people that I work with who've said,
mm,
they've had a talk with someone who said, I was feeling really down and I came and saw your show tonight and it just absolutely lifted my spirits. And or
yeah.
that was exactly, I feel that way about my relationships, or or you've unlocked something for me that I didn't realize I needed to feel. And that's where you kind of get the payback, is that
Mm,
you feel, hopefully on a good night, at the
mm,
very least, you've helped people kind of have a good time for a couple of hours. At the most, you might have helped them solve a complex human problem that they've not had the ability to express or understand for themselves. And because of the show and the performance and the way that you've tackled it and understood it and then presented it, then
yep.
you've articulated something for them in front of them that maybe that they're not able to articulate for themselves. And
But
so this is
it's
why.
being live as well, though, right? Like you can't watch
Absolutely.
a
Well,
theatrical on
you're
a
having a
DVD or
conversation.
something. It's
Yeah.
well, it's just something about it being live is, you hear people talking about The Lion King, for example, and when they saw it live, they were tears of joy. Like people were crying at
Hmm.
how beautiful it was. But if you're watching it on a little screen on a flight from here to somewhere, and
Yeah.
not getting that live sensation, and live is everything. Like there's
Yeah.
so much to gain, so much to lose. It's so risky if you think about it, because you're
Hmm.
not just pressing play. It's
Yeah.
like,
And that's the thing, and that's part of the thing that people really enjoy as well, because you
mm,
know you can't overestimate or underestimate your audience. They're all humans. And even if
yep,
they can't say exactly what it is, maybe sometimes they know exactly what it is because they're a human. So if they see you on stage and they go, oh, he almost fucked that up, or and then he
yeah,
got back and then he made it work, and they go, yeah, and then they feel that because it's
yeah,
live and they're there and you're exchanging that energy, from the stage to the people in the audience. And that's the live element. It's the same with, I don't know, I guess it's maybe why, all of these kind of shows like X Factor and American Idol and things like that, you're seeing the rawness of those performances. That's why people are kind of connecting to that, because there's a realness to it. And people,
100%.
whatever it is, people want that realness. And you get it mostly when you go and see something live, if it's a band or,
Yep.
a play reading in a cafe or whatever it is. You know, you just those real moments are what everybody craves. And I think during a time like this, you know, this is what people are going to start to crave more once they realize that, God, we haven't had any live stuff for a while. You know, gee, that'd be
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's almost like in the day and age right now, like when you and I were in uni, the internet was so slow and so just starting to happen that we weren't on it. Like
No,
we weren't checking our phones. We weren't checking Facebook. There was no Facebook. There was no
nope.
blogger. There was, we just didn't have any reason to waste time on that. Like,
Yeah, dude, look,
uh,
this is how long ago it was. I remember having a conversation with one of our lecturers. It might
mm,
have been Michael Dickinson. Uh, it was me trying to save a project to one of those old SCSI drives, those big,
those
clunky,
big,
you know,
massive,
stupid external
yeah,
drive, right? And I'd
yeah.
done a CD cover design, and he came up to me and he said, "Well, you're never going to save that. That's 564 megabytes. How are you going to save that?" I'm like, well, I don't know. He said, well, you're going to have to compress the file or get rid of some of those images because you'll never save that. It's too big.
Isn't that crazy? I
564
know,
megabytes is too big.
dude. And we used to have 14.4K modems, and the screen resolutions were like 800, 640 by 480, 800
Yep.
by 600, and we um we lived in a time where maybe performances and live performances and all of that stuff was just so much more accessible and respected. And even if we loved a TV show, we would hang out for the next episode next week, and we would
Mhm.
sit through the ads, and we would just not like cramming a whole year's worth of episodes in one sitting on Netflix. It
Yeah,
was
we definitely have, as a society as a whole, have started kind of using our time differently. And I think I've become so much more aware of it during this, you know, lockdown time
100%.
period.
I think a lot of
Um,
people have. Yeah.
yeah, you just kind of go, wow, is that what I do?
Yeah.
Shit, maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't do that all the time. You know, and I had that experience briefly when I was on the ships doing the shows, but because that was only for a kind of shorter period of time, I was normally only on there for like 3 or 4 months. You kind of
Mm,
go out there and you go, okay, well that was that, and now I'm back to life, so now I'll kind of do my thing again. Because there's not
mm.
a lot of you can get Wi-Fi and internet on the ship, but you don't get it free as a performer, and it costs stupid money
Wow.
to
Okay.
pay for it. So you end up just not using it. And so then you don't
Which
kind
is
of use
great.
the social media, and you don't spend all that time on the internet, and you kind of get back to life as, you know, as dare I say it, maybe it once was, when we kind of used our time a bit
Do you
differently.
remember yourself being do you remember yourself being happier during those moments?
I I don't remember myself being sad. So,
Mm.
you know,
Maybe like you had to keep yourself busy, so you had to go do
I
something.
just
But hey,
remember
you could.
kind of being busy all the time, but doing stuff that felt like you just kind of, I don't know. I think our attention span and our intensity, like our ability to kind of use that intensity, focused energy on something, has
Mm,
kind of dissipated a bit because we've not had to do it as often, because we live in the society now where it's kind of bite-sized chunks of information, 30-second, clips of this and short. I get really annoyed when I see things that say, here's an article, and it's like 2 paragraphs. I'm like, fuck you, man. That's not an article. It's two
right.
paragraphs.
Right.
Write something, engage me, you know.
Well,
But
even a podcast like this, man, if we even for someone to be listening to this point, like sometimes I'll put a podcast up, it's 2 hours, and initial comments will be like, bro, 2 hours. Like they haven't got 2 hours. And then some people that actually listen to it, they'll message me and they're like, oh, listen to your podcast. I'm like, cool, man. And they're like, no, I really I listened to it I listened to the whole 2 hours, bro. I'm like, yeah, well, what do you want? Like
Good. You
a
should.
prize, a medal? Like fuck. Like, is it that hard? You know? But it's gotten like that. I think this whole American politics thing. Like, I see so many people on social media. You know, either they're on one side or the other, but they're fucking angry, and they're writing shit on their Facebook about Trump or about Biden, and you know, it's getting to a point where if you're on the other side, then I fucking hate you. And this
Yeah.
separatism for no reason, it's like you might have people that have been Facebook friends for like 10 years, but then all of a sudden they're deleting anyone that's supporting the other side. I'm like, wow, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a strange time because I think, at once we're kind of more invested and also less invested in everything. So because we live in a world which is kind of, we have this universal access to kind of everything at once, we can kind of be, armchair warriors or, internet
Right.
warriors,
Yeah.
keyboard warriors,
Keyboard warriors,
and
yeah.
kind of really go in on something. But it's only in that plane. It's like, right, yeah, I've said my piece. Now I'll get back to, whatever it is that I'm doing with my life. And
It's so true.
I don't know. It's like, hey, are you actually invested in that? And it's a different time where, we need to care. I think we do need to care about those sorts of things, but we've got to think about the way that we care about them, and whether we're actually adding anything beneficial by putting a rubbish comment or posting another thing, because we've all pretty much, a lot of people would have watched that documentary, The Social Dilemma.
Oh
And
yeah. I'm glad that
that's,
that's
that's
out there.
pretty
I'm
pretty
glad it's
eye-opening.
waking
And there's a
people
few
up.
other ones like that as well. I think there's
Of
one
course, yeah.
about Google called The Creepy Line, which
Yeah.
is all about their ethics, and basically they're willing to do anything that doesn't go over the creepy line. That's the kind of premise of the documentary. And so, I think there's no escaping social media. There's no escaping, how pervasive it is in our lives now. But I would love to see a time where, maybe we all start to kind of interact with it quite differently. And I'm not as present on it as a lot of people. I foolishly, when I left Australia for the UK, thought to myself, this is great. There's this thing called Facebook. I'll be able to keep in touch with all of my pals, and we'll be able to do stuff. And of course, that's not what happened, because everyone kind of just went inwards and said, well, I'm just kind of making all of this about me. And look, fair enough. Like I was one of those people who kind of said, well, I'll do a bit of that as well, because I'm an actor and I need to do, let people know what I'm doing. But that's just kind of one of the pitfalls of it. I think, it's very difficult for it not to become a kind of some sort of egotistical extension of your life.
Yeah. Well,
Particularly if
it's
you're
a
in the
blinking
showbiz
cursor,
world.
isn't it? It's a blinking cursor. Like if you go back to uni, we didn't have an easy way to publish anything. Like
No.
we had radio, print, and television, and we didn't have a blinking cursor that was saying what's on your mind today, or like that thing that you can just sit there and go da 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 da, and then put it up to the world. And you're so right about Facebook being this like temporary thing, because at least with the internet forums and stuff, you could write something and then you could search for it and it'll be archived. It'll still be there. But with Facebook, you write something like, I can't remember what I wrote this day 3 months ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's lost. It's long lost in this endless scrolling thing.
Yeah. I heard someone describe it. It might have been on a television show, more than likely, described it as screaming into the abyss.
Yeah. I've
I
always
think that's
felt it. Like I've
exactly
always
it.
been in businesses that like use social media, and I've always been quite good at it. But I've said it so many times in my design career where I've literally written down and gone, one of my fears is looking back on my life and going, fuck, I spent 30 fucking years on Facebook. You know, I've always said it. I've always been scared of it. Like, yes, I've used it for business. Yes, I tend to use it to promote things, but I catch myself out. Like when I'm I'm getting to a point now, and it's not the social dilemma. It's not. It's just getting to an age and getting comfortable with trying to strip things back and figure out what I'm excited about. Like recently, I wrote a piece about advertising sucks because
I read that actually, and I agreed with you.
well, that's the thing. It's a hard thing to agree with, especially if you're in advertising. But it just
Yeah,
feels weird that it's taken me this long to realize like a majority of people on this planet don't like advertising. And why the fuck was
yeah,
I in it for so long? Like it's just so weird how sometimes you've got the blinders on and you're chasing goals, or you think what you're doing is great, or
yeah.
your advertising is better than everybody else's or something. And you've got this, it's too short a narrower focus. Um,
Yeah, I well, I think the thing with advertising is that, you know, the problem is that if you're any good at it, that you're really good at, kind of creating a moment or fueling an emotion. And the difficulty or the problem is then the arse end of that is you then manipulate that emotion to sell what it is you want to sell. So
manipulate is a key word. I mean, that's a
yeah,
key. You
so
just said it. Like that. That's
so it's actually like in a lot of ways, it's kind of very similar to, acting or any type of
acting.
performance. But
Right.
we're trying to
Right.
we're trying to
Right.
manipulate it, hopefully, for good.
I
I don't know.
I think acting is closer to art, and that's why, like, getting back to what you do, like, and I know we went on a weird tangent there with society today and social media and stuff, but I feel like what you do is one of the true arts, and it's really freaky right now how many of these true arts aren't getting out there. It's not so much they're not getting out there; they're still there, right? But it's freaky how many young people don't have any value for it. And I understand that because every human being only has X amount of value to give. I get it. Just say you've got like 100 value, and there you give some here, you give some there. You can't give it out to everything. But I do worry about like, and it's just like I think as I get older, I get more, I romanticize things a bit more, and I
I don't know if that's true, Justin, because I want to
no.
say in terms, well, no, it is true, but also not true, because I think one of the things that I've always admired about you, one of the biggest things I've always admired about you, is that you've always unashamedly been yourself.
Hmm.
And so I think that's just you as an older version still kind of being yourself and being true to the ideals and ideas that you've always kind of had, which have been based in art and truth and the way that
Yep.
you want to express yourself. So just getting back to you saying about being worried that you've spent 30 years on Facebook. Well, I don't actually think that matters, because you're just doing you and you being truthful and honest, and that's just kind of a moment in the big scheme of things, and who gives a fuck
Mm,
anyway.
mm,
But
mm, mm.
I think with I think with this generation now, I because this fascinates me, and I love talking about this stuff.
Mhm,
There,
mhm.
there's been a lot of people who've kind of popped up in this Instagram age and have kind of, you hear kids at school saying, what do you want to be when you're older? And so I want to be an influencer, or I just want to be on YouTube, or and they've kind of lost, they've never they've lost or either never known the kind of art of discovering what these arts are, because the
Mhm,
the
mhm.
trajectory for their kind of entertainment career or their art career or any of that, it's entirely different now. And in some ways it's better, because there are different opportunities available to them, and they can reach a wider audience, and they can have a platform that's kind of instantly accessible. But
Mhm.
you you don't you don't kind of get the same experience if you don't go through the process of discovery, and sometimes that is wrapped up in struggle. It's because the
100%.
struggle is where you get to know yourself.
The
And
blood, sweat, and
you know
tears.
yeah, all of that. You've got to, you a lot of the best art is born out of the dark times of self-discovery, and when I'm not suggesting to people go and hit rock bottom, you'll become a fantastic artist, but you certainly discover things about yourself, and find, you find resources that you didn't think you had, and you find ways of expressing that you didn't think you had, and you don't get that if you've got 200,000 followers on Instagram just because you're cute.
100%, man. Like,
You know?
like putting that back on you for a second, then, like, so the Daniel that I knew in uni, we were all in the same boat in that, like, we weren't necessarily good at anything yet. We were on our way to getting good. I think that's what uni kind of did for us. Was you didn't come out of there and you were a fucking master at something, but you sort of had an idea and you had the tools to, you had a thicker skin. You know,
Yeah.
it's like your parents saying growing up, well, fuck, doing all those thumbnails, having lecturers break your balls and say, you know, failing you and try again, and all of that gave us these tools to then potentially get good. Which I'm curious with you then, because you just kind of got good. Like the next time I caught up with you after all of those years, you were already on the stage. You were already out of the country. Yeah, no, sure. I saw you on some ads and stuff, but that's still like getting good. But then I saw you, and you were already good. So, to people that are listening, who are maybe in their early 20s, and they don't even know what they're into, like they hate their job so much, and they're sitting there thinking like, yeah, but I'm not good at anything else, or I wouldn't know what I want to do next, or I don't know what I'm good at. And where was it for you where you distinctly went from being like where a lot of kids are today, or not just kids, but people who haven't felt proud of putting that pain in and doing something where it's genuine confidence in their skill set and they actually know it? Like,
Yeah.
when was it for you where you knew you had the skills to pay the bills? You felt that, holy shit, it's all fucking finally come together because of the hard work I've put in. Like, when did that happen for you? Like, from Kofa to when was that moment?
Well, I think there's a couple of ideas there. I think first of all, you've got to follow your passion. Like if you've got passion for something, whatever it is, you know, like with everything that you've done with ZEN and with ZEN Garage and the cars and everything, you know, that was born out of your passion. And then of course, you know, all the other elements of you that you bring to it came together to make it the success. And I think that that's where it kind of lives. If you've got something that passion just wins hands down every time, because it gives you the drive and the motivation and the kind of love and the joy and everything that you need to get up in the morning and do it without thinking about it, because you just go, I just fucking love doing this, I'm
You
going to
have
do it
to do
again.
it.
You don't
You
have
have
to
to
pay
do
me,
it.
I'll do it for free, you know. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that sort of motivation, you can't get that from a 6-minute clip off of YouTube with Tony Robbins saying, get up, enjoy your day, go on, do it, do it. Like that
Yeah,
comes
it's so
from, you
true.
know, it sounds a bit wanky, but it comes from within, and that's what you need. And so I think if you find something that you're passionate about, you know, I don't care if it's carving garden gnomes out of fucking clay. If that's your
Right.
thing, then you follow that passion. The other thing that I had, and you know, as a young person, I think, you know, I wouldn't be the first one who fell prey to their own kind of ego, as it were. But I just had an unwavering belief in myself.
Yeah,
I just,
yeah.
this is what I'm doing, and that's it. And I think if you have that, you know, and maybe that's, you know, 50% naivety and 50% stupidity, I don't know. But I certainly took that with me. And I always just told myself I was already good enough. And I know that might again seem like like an obvious thing to do, but to kind of get rid of a lot of that self-doubt to begin with, made it easier for me. And don't get me wrong, it it crept in pretty soon, like down the track, like, oh shit, am I actually good enough? Like, and even now today, you know, like doing bigger jobs and different things, you go, oh crap, how am I gonna
Yeah.
get into this one? But by
Which is
that
fine.
stage,
That's normal, right? You still
yeah,
have
you've
to have
developed the
nerves. You have
tool.
to have, yeah.
Yeah. But by that stage, you've developed the tools to kind of work out what you need to do, and it just then is part of the process. But I think the thing that was also extremely helpful was that I I didn't I didn't come out of an institution, and again, I'm not saying this is what people do. Um, I, I I didn't come out of an institution and think, right, I've learned everything now. Now get out of my way. Here I go. I was like, right,
Yep.
I'm just going to learn from everybody. I don't
Yep.
care if it's that guy who's done nothing or if it's this person who's done every role under the sun or whatever. Everyone's got something that they can teach me, and I'm just going to be a sponge, and I'm just going to kind of, I'm not going
So,
to commit to one way of working. I'm just going to go, right, whatever works, that's how we're going to do it, because I'm going to be that tenacious about it that anything can make this work for me.
so you said
So
two
that's
different
kind of
things there, because you have, like, you always have had a healthy ego. Like, I'm the same. I got a fucking huge ego, but the ego didn't get in the way of you being open-minded and open to change. And, you
right.
know,
It's the paradox of existence.
yeah, but you can't expect, like, we can't expect everyone to get that. Like, that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I find it
No,
really
it's
difficult, when people ask me, like, how the fuck are you so into what you're into? And I can just see that they're really frustrated, because even thinking about it is so difficult for them. Like, even
yeah,
thinking about, um, just even hearing someone just say that they don't feel like they w- they're not skilled at anything else, and they hate their job, but it's not even about taking the risk, Dan, to quit the job, because they don't even want to take that risk, because they don't even know what they would do after that. So a
yeah,
lot of people, maybe, I want to be a musician, and I've always wanted to be a musician or something like that, and so they take the risk to quit, but then they know the risk involved in trying to get out there as a musician. But that's the way you said, like, that's where their passion lies, and they've already got that sort of drive. Like, they're already putting their head on the pillow at night thinking about gigging and playing and album covers and all of that. But what
yeah.
would you say to someone who, they can see that you've done this show 1,000 times? Like, that is almost intimidating. I don't mean it to be, but it almost is, for someone who
Yeah.
is so comfortable within that lane. You can't possibly be anything but, like, owning it at that stage. So what would you say to people who maybe, they're not born with it? You can get
Mhm.
good at it. You're not going to be good at it from day one, but you hit on passion being an important thing. I'm totally with you. Passion has made everything easier for me.
Yeah.
You're 100% right.
I
But what
think
do
the
you
other
say to
thing
someone
that,
with no passion, or no, they don't even know what their passion is?
yeah, I think it's important to remember that we're all, you know, while we're kind of all the same, we're all wired very differently.
Yeah.
And, you know, even thinking back to the uni days, you know,
Mm.
the way that different people express themselves, you know, you might not have necessarily agreed with or even liked the stuff that they came up with for a particular design, but you can appreciate it and go, okay, well, that's their take on it. And actually, if
Yep.
I frame that in a different point of view, it's actually quite good. Um, but for someone who's looking to do different things, I think, you know, we live in a society now which is so commercial and capitalist. And so a lot of the choices that people make are bound up with, you know, this kind of life, money, work kind of paradox where they're
Mm.
trying to balance, you know, how do I be creative but still earn money? And how do I do this? And, you know, I've got all these bills to pay and I've got to make these big decisions. And a lot of that is going to dampen any enthusiasm or passion that you might have for something. So, what I would say to anyone who's trying to kind of maybe try something new is just take it easy on yourself. Just be really gentle and
Mm.
just be happy to kind of explore something without any need for a result, because we're
No
so
pressure.
result.
Take the pressure
You
off.
know,
Yeah.
take the pressure off and just be like, you know what? Uh, like I watched an episode. I've been getting into Californication. I've never watched it before, but it's a really cool series, you know.
Mm.
And David Duchovny's great, and it's just the whole aesthetic of it I just find really appealing. And there's one character, there's a guest character at the moment. It's a girl who's playing the nanny of one of the main couples. She's looking after this kid, but you know, one minute she's like, oh, I'm doing this cooking course, and then one minute, you know, she's like, actually, I'm just trying to be a writer. Now I'm going to be an actor. She's doing all this stuff. She just can't
Yeah.
work it out, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely fine. Like, you just can't be afraid to just try stuff,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
at the very worst, you know, you've tried something new and it's like, oh, well, that didn't work, you know, and at the least you might learn a new skill or a little bit of something. But I just think, you know, be kind to yourself, be tread gently, and just go, actually, I'll have a little go of this. That might,
Mm.
yeah, and you might do that 100 times before you set onto something that you go, actually, I'm quite into this. And it might not be earth-shatteringly life-changing. It might
Hmm.
just be
Hmm.
you discover a hobby that actually adds a little bit of value to the rest of your life. And you've
Mm.
got to be okay to go, that's actually fine as well.
I
You know,
like that, man. I think a lot of people maybe expect to get good overnight or get into something like you suggested, like change your life overnight. Or um, I like the idea of just taking the pressure off completely and being open to trying new things without any intention, but just to try it. I kind of like that.
yeah. And and
Yeah.
and you know, I think a big lesson that I've learned through all of this, and
Mm.
there's a lot of this talk, you know, it's very kind of prevalent on the internet now. And you know, I feel like I've always thought this way, and I feel like these kind of thoughts now just kind of validate the way that I've been living for a while. So it kind of makes me happy in a way to
Yeah.
see now there's all of these kind of people on the internet saying these same sorts of things. Although you
Hmm.
do get a lot of people who go, I've done a 3-week course and now I'm a life coach. And you know, if you want to change your life, come and talk to me. Just like,
There's a
just
lot of
stop.
that. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
um, but I think this whole idea of failure is one that, you know, we've kind of had it wrong for a long time. A lot of people have had it wrong. You've got to fail at shit. You
Hmm.
have to fail,
Hmm.
and it's what happens after you fail is where you get the growth.
I think that's why we're in an age group now where when you fail at 20, it's different to failing at 40, you know? Like when you fail at
Yeah,
40, it's hard. Whereas like when I see someone, 20 years old, that they've posted up a photo of them like working their ass off in the gym. I'm like, fucking do that when you're 45 and I might be impressed. But at 20, like,
yeah, right.
come on, it's a bit easy, isn't it?
Well,
You know?
the good thing about you know, depending on how you look at it, the good thing about being an actor is that you really get a good understanding of rejection. Because
In
you
what way?
you
In
do
what way? You mean
well,
when you're applying
you
for
do
stuff?
for every one audition that I've kind of landed, there's, you
Yeah.
know, there's been 10, 20, 50, 100 that I haven't got. So you very quickly learn to go, wow, you know, that was magnificent and they hated me, or wow, that was actually really just shit. Today you were shit, or like whatever it is.
Far out.
You get really used to not taking it personally. And
Yeah.
so I think because of that, you can do certain things. Like when I was younger, if I failed at something, I'd be furious and I'd
Yeah.
beat
You're so
myself
cut,
up and I'd be
right?
like,
Mm.
what am I like? But now it's
Mm.
like, get over yourself. Right. Do the next thing. Because if you want to do this, you just got to do something else. Try it differently.
It's
And I
almost like
think
it's
that
out of your control kind of thing. So why would you
absolutely.
lose all this energy and pour it into something that you just can't change anyway? So you might as well
Yeah.
go forward. Mm.
Yeah, at acting school, you know, I remember a really good lesson where they just kind of said, "Look, everything's out of your control in this business. Everything.
Mm. Mm.
The only thing you can control is you and how prepared you are, and how well you've slept, and if you look after yourself, and
Mhm.
if you know you've got a lot of energy and you're alert. So do that. and focus on that. It's like, okay, I'll focus on that. And then the minute you start doing that, then things start going better, because instead of focusing on the shit that you've got no control over, you just focus on the things that you can. And then of course you get different results.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm still even learning that to this day. That's the funny thing. It's like student for life, right? Like when I started watching a little bit of these American politics thing, I went down the rabbit hole checking out YouTube and finding all this hilarious political crap. And I started posting some of it on my social media. And then I realized that people were being dead serious in the comments. And I'm like, I didn't want this. I didn't want friends of mine to all of a sudden try to educate me or or look at me in a negative light because I wasn't taking something so seriously or as seriously as they were. I'm like, man, I really don't need this in my life. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I have so much energy to give. So I think that concept of like getting caught up in all of this negative stuff, it's pretty easy for people. It's pretty easy to, when you say take care of yourself, the way I look at it is like, well, taking care of myself would be to not comment on something that I have no ability to change anyway.
Of course.
So
Yeah,
why
like
would I put myself in this ring of fire for entertainment's sake? It's not very entertaining. It's like, I
no,
don't
I
need
couldn't
these bad
agree
vibes. And
more.
yeah.
I
So
think, and I think as well, like we've gotten so used to being in that world that we don't see that as not looking after ourselves.
no,
Like
not at all.
a lot of people go, oh, I'm gonna just why are you shouting at someone who
Shouting, exactly.
there's what you all you're doing is upsetting yourself.
And you're also to the people who aren't good at contributing to social media, and they're sitting there and they're hovering over the blinking cursor and they're like, there's no fucking way I'm going to get involved in this shit. Then you look like an
Yeah,
absolute fool to them, because they might like you, they might be your friend, but then when they see you doing it, they're like, oh god,
yeah.
why is my mate wasting time on this? Because where's it gonna take him? Where's it gonna
Yeah,
take
and of
him?
course, it's not a real indication of how, even though it is a real part of our world now, it's not
Hmm. Hmm.
a good kind of example of how conversations work in the real world. So take our conversation
True.
today, for example.
Mm.
We've covered a whole bunch of topics, and we've kind of gone back and forth, and
Yep.
there's been tangents, and then we've reconnected ideas, and
Yep.
you know we've talked about a whole kind of myriad of things. But if you were to write it down and read it on a screen, you wouldn't be able to know, what the intention of a lot of things were, because there's no nuance, because you can't hear people's voices. You can't
Yeah.
really, you wouldn't be able to follow the exchange because it's been so kind of tangential. You'd get
Yep.
lost in it, and you'd just make your own decisions based upon, your unique point of view. And this is why I kind of often just go, you know what, I can't, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of times where I go, oh, I'd really want to write something about this. And rather
Yeah.
than write it, I'll actually say to my girlfriend, listen, I just want to tell you this thing that I was
Yeah.
gonna write. and, and 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 tell me if you think this is funny. She's like, yeah, it's funny. Okay, good. And she's, yeah, don't write it. I said, okay, fine.
That's look, I think
No,
that's really cool too. Like that's the thing. Like I don't like sometimes a part of me wishes that people would comment on some of the stuff that I write in public, because they send me such beautiful things. Like they send me
yeah,
such awesome private messages thanking me for maybe being open or being vulnerable or whatever. And I'm like, part of me is kind of like, oh fuck, I wish you wrote that on that loud, disgusting social media wall called Facebook,
on the big
But
board.
right, but I understand they don't want anything to do with it, because it wouldn't take a minute for an absolute negative troll to just hammer them for saying something like thank you to
Yeah.
me or something, and they don't want to be subject to that kind of stupidity. So I totally get it. I totally get it. Like part of me wishes that more people would come out, but it's not for everybody, man. It is not for everybody. Like,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you've been really open with the stuff that you've shared with people, and I think
always have though. I think, yeah.
you've always been like that, and so
Mm,
like it didn't surprise me. Like I thought, out of anyone, who was in our kind of university group,
Mm,
anyone
mm,
who would have been able to embrace, social media and that sort of technology would have been you. So I wasn't surprised, but I
mm,
think,
mm, mm.
I think anyway, it's just giving you a big rap for just being yourself and being honest. So
Yeah,
well
yeah.
done.
Cheers, bro. No, cheers, bro. I mean, a lot of something that people don't know about me was in university. Like most people would be wearing sneakers, not skinny jeans, by the way. People were wearing pretty normal jeans back then, and a t-shirt. I was like wearing stockings and heels, and I
Yeah,
was
it was
like,
awesome.
I just remembered Peter Travis, one of our design lecturers, would give me the hardest time for the whole semester, the whole year. He gave me the hardest time, and the very last class that I had with Peter Travis, he sat down next to me, and yeah, I've got my hair extensions. I'm looking like absolutely ridiculous, right? And he sat down next to me and he said, the reason why I was really hard on you was I don't think all of this stupid stuff you've got in your hair and what you're wearing, I think it's all stupid, it's all rubbish. But I think there is some talent in you there somewhere, but I think you're caught up in all of this external ridiculousness. And that's the reason why I was hard on you all year. And I kind of just had to take it. I kind of got what he was trying to say. I think,
Yeah. But
he
also, I
was,
mean, I don't know
but
if it was his position to say, like
oh,
he's got to
I,
say
I know, I
something. Like
know.
that's his take on it. Like also, fuck you, man.
Yeah. But I had a lot of people say stuff like that, things like that to me. But I think it's just
But that's
because
the
maybe
growing
they thought that I
experience.
was, yeah, but I think a lot of people think that I was maybe going through a phase or something. But like, I don't think I ever was. Like, I think there's always been a part of me that's always been like that. So it's almost like,
I see. I never thought you were. I thought it was just. I thought it was like, here's this guy who's my friend, who's like, he's got design, but he's also firmly in the kind of art world,
yeah.
and this is just the expression. This is just expression, and that's
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
people kind
Hmm.
of didn't understand. It's like it's not acting out. It's not.
No,
It's not.
it
Trying
wasn't
to draw
fake. No.
attention. It's just this is because I number one because I can. Okay, and secondly, it's just
Just
why not?
yeah, yeah. I don't think.
You just want it to express.
Yeah, I just wanted more people to join me. Like I kind of wanted my. I feel
Well,
like my whole life I've always been like, the people call it the black sheep or whatever, but I feel like even with my family, they've always been like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll want children one day," and I feel like I've been on this like repeat kind of like, I still don't want children, but it's like I feel like everyone around me has always been like, "Oh yeah, no, you're just doing that for now, and you'll grow up or you'll change or whatever." And so it's
well,
funny that like now I'm still exactly the same in many ways, still doing
this is the
this.
problem when you don't subscribe to the norms of society, is that
Uh,
immediately people think,
yeah,
"Wow, there's got to be something wrong with that dude,"
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
"Well,
yeah, yeah.
you don't want to hang on a minute. You're 45 and you don't have a house and kids and a car and a holiday home, and it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, because I'm actually focusing on this. Yeah, but what about, hang on a minute?" And then you talk to those people
yeah.
down the track. Like Facebook's interesting for this, I think, because you can kind of, as a kind of satellite orbiting other people's worlds from a distance, you can go, all right, well, you're just kind of doing exactly what society has dictated that you should do with your life. And that's absolutely fine. Don't get me
Mhm,
wrong. I'm not
mhm,
having a
mhm.
go at the way that
No, no,
anyone
no.
else
Of course not.
chooses
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
live their life. And if you're entirely happy with that, then I'm actually saying to you, that's brilliant.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there are a lot of people who do that and have no, they do it unconsciously. It's not a conscious
Mm,
decision. They're just
mm.
doing it because they've been trained and they've been kind of conditioned throughout their life to respond to society in a way that tells them that this is how they should live and breathe and be and end and fucking die. And
You
if you
touched on
choose
that
to do
earlier. There's
something
every type of
different,
person, right? There's a whole
yeah,
spectrum of people out there. You said that earlier, and I think that's tying that back in. It's like maybe not everyone is meant to get up in the morning with this crazy passion, and there's all types of people. But I think, yeah, if you're really unhappy with where you are in life, then that does deserve a fair bit of attention, I think, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes it's difficult to pin down the things that like that are making you unhappy,
Mm.
because if it's just kind of, I always think like to again, to take the acting analogy, right? You can learn a lot from the
Please do,
theatre of
yeah.
comedy.
Please do,
Is
please
that
do.
wherever there's drama, there's tension or there's opposition. And so if you've got tension or opposition in your life, then you've got to look at the forces that are kind of competing in you for two different things. You
Mm.
know, like you might have an idea of who you want to be, but you've not been able to fulfill that for yourself because you might still be trying to do what your parents thought you should do, when you haven't been
Sure.
able to take yourself out of under the wings of the expectations of your parents. Or it might
Mm.
be you might be with a partner, and on you everything works well together, and you're in a great relationship, but maybe you have an expectation of how you think your relationship should be, or that person should be, and so then there might be a disconnect there, but it might be based on expectation. So then there's your tension, there's your drama. And once you identify it, then you can kind of deal with it, and you can focus on it, and you can heighten it, or you can get rid of it. And I think a lot of people don't understand maybe that simple concept, is that rather than being the driver, they're just the passenger, they're just the byproduct of the situation that they're in, rather than going, oh, actually let's identify the drama or the
Yep.
tension, or the thing that's actually the disconnect for us, and let's try and work through it and communicate and be better
I like
communicators.
that because it's super constructive. What I like about that is you see a lot of like YouTube videos that like you suggested earlier, even like you watch it for 2 or 3 minutes and it'll change your life, or watch this video, it'll change your life, and you hover over it, it's a 3-minute video, and it's like I think a lot of people are so quick to try to experience something that they don't even know exists. It's like eternal happiness, or it's like it's you're never going to be happy every single day of your life, no matter how good you get at it, because shit happens, right? So I
Yeah,
kind of like that idea of like um making a change where you can, as opposed to trying to make a change on something that just feels like, well, I'm not fucking experienced at that, so it just seems like too big a goal. So I kind of like that. It's pretty constructive.
yeah. Keep it simple, man.
That's it, man. Holy shit. Less is more. Didn't we learn that in design school?
Less
Less
is
is
more.
more.
Less is more. You've got to know when to kind of go, okay, I think I've done enough here. You got to know when to go, no, that's it. Less is more,
Dude,
and
I think, I
and
mean,
also
yeah.
like the other thing that I think was really important at uni was just kind of learning to appreciate different aesthetics,
Yeah.
and seeing the beauty in kind of everyday stuff, and seeing the beauty in the really beautiful stuff. You were always really good at that, because your aesthetic was quite different, and because your mum had the fashion stuff, and
Mm.
you had all of that kind of fashion background, you had a kind of, I like to describe it as like a dark beauty. Like, there was just
Mm.
those two kind of elements that kind of came together, and it's a different aesthetic. You learn to appreciate the simple, but also the bigger, bolder stuff. And I think that that's a good little lesson as well, is that like I mean, the amount of times that we would just go into a store when we were at university, like, oh, look at that handle on that thing, that's amazing. Like this stupid stuff, that you go, wow, I love
Yeah.
the curve of that thing, or whatever it is. And if
Yeah.
you can appreciate that really simple stuff, then everything is a little bit easier.
I think the concept development stuff that we had in uni was great too, in that like it was 60% concept, 40% presentation. So what the course tried to avoid was us not having an idea or an answer to a problem, or like a solution to a problem. Instead,
Yeah.
you could do, like Dom, for example, would like not do any work on the brief for the entire 3 months. And then the night before, he would do something that looked so fucking hot and so before its time that
Yeah. He's
he
a
would
magician.
get, yeah, he would get a pass on how sexy it looked. But that's what the course was trying to sort of avoid, because they were trying to say they weren't too worried about us not being the best graphic designers in terms of visuals at that point. They were trying
Yeah.
to build up our minds, right? They were trying to say, we're not going to score you on how sexy your presentation looks. We're going to actually put more weight on what's your concept. And I just remembered people used to break down when, Ron Newman would sit there and go, but what's your concept? And people would be like, and then he'd be like, well, but what's your concept? But people used to cry. People used to cry. I
Yeah.
don't know if
Yeah.
you remember that, but some people would cry because the pressure was so intense. And if you didn't have a concept, you were basically screwed, and you tried your best to come up with some shit, but it just didn't work.
Yeah. I
So
remember there were certain people that would cry
mm.
every time, like
It,
every
it's
time.
it was tough, man. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I just don't know. I mean, maybe degrees are just as hard today as they were for us back then. But I think we didn't quit. You and I didn't quit. We actually saw it. I mean, a 4-year course. We saw it all the way through.
It's a long
Um,
course, isn't it?
it's very long, and what I find fascinating is that you're in a completely different sort of realm than I am, to where Dom is, to where Simon is, to where all the people that graduated, we are all in completely different areas and places in regards to the industry and using the skills that we developed. And I find that absolutely fascinating, because it goes to show that maybe the course worked in that it did train us more on how to think creatively and
Yeah.
hone
I
in on
don't
those
think
skills.
I don't think I don't think we can undervalue the honing of that conceptual thinking skill.
Right, right.
You know,
It's
it's
amazing, isn't it? In
pretty
retrospect,
amazing.
it's yeah.
Yeah.
In retrospect, they really drilled it into us to solve problems properly, not
Yeah.
just that'll do, not just I'm just gonna splash some bright red and neon green's really cool right now. I'm just gonna put it neon green. Like
Yeah.
we actually solved problems. We didn't just make it look cool, or you know,
Yeah.
like
And there had to be a reason.
yeah,
Like you've got to connect it
yeah,
to something.
yeah,
What's the meaning? What's the dialogue? How does
yeah,
this
yeah,
relate?
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and I I think hopefully soon I'm going to have like a full circle moment, because my final project for uni, I don't know if you remember, it was a very long time ago, but I
Mm,
adapted a book to the stage and did all the kind of
nice.
graphics that went with it and did all the sets and costumes and all of that stuff, because it was always my intention at some point to hopefully be able to do that.
Yep.
And I've directed a few little things over the years and done some filmmaking and done different all sorts of creative stuff. But in the last probably 5 or 6 years, I've become much more serious about writing things.
That's awesome.
And
So good to
I'm
hear.
yeah, and I've been working with a friend of mine who has written a lot of musicals, and we're developing a project at the moment which we've very gratefully got the rights to, which was a documentary, which we're going to adapt into a stage show. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's all about the 80s and computer games and just kind of really cool stuff that everyone's really going to enjoy. But, I'm looking forward to being able to kind of bring all of those elements of everything that I've been working on over the last 20 years, design, acting, all of that creativity, and just going, here you go, this is what we were talking about. and
Jeez,
and
man, that really
yeah,
excites me. I think I just got, like, those electric moments, because like I think when you think back of our final, you mentioned a second ago, like your final graduation project, for people listening that don't know, we had a whole year to write ourselves our own brief. and
Mm.
do whatever you wanted basically for the entire year. Like I don't know of any other uni course that would let you do that. And a lot of people that created like, a fake job or something to it just didn't make sense to me. Like it made like what you did then was just completely ambitious and passion related and set yourself up, and the whole concept of coming full circle with taking that risk to set that as your major project. It's like it's kind of like everything really, because can you imagine if you just did like something just to get a job or something? It just wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah. Well, it I think it came from the right place. I think that's
Yeah, yeah.
my best takeaway from it. And it, it was always my intention to try and marry all of those things
Even back
together.
then,
So
even back
even
then,
even
like
back
that's
then. So,
amazing.
because I went
Yeah.
into, I went into a design degree knowing that I
Mm.
wanted to be an actor. So I had to somehow put it all together. And
Yeah.
in retrospect, it, I think it will have worked out better for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
I love it. I think I think we should wrap up the podcast, but I just think we've covered all this stuff without having a bullet point itinerary
I
things
know.
of
How
things
good are
that we
we?
Yeah. But I like that, and I think there's sure there are heaps more people out there that are older and more experienced than us, or even younger that are more experienced than us. But I do know personally that I do get a lot of younger listeners and people who, uh, if they had put the effort into listening to this, which is not an easy task for them, I understand, but I think there are some nuggets of gold in there that you came up with today that are, even I hadn't thought of the things the way you frame things. So I think there's a a few nice messages in there to, the whole be kind to yourself and slow it down a little bit. And you know, I think there's lots of nuggets of gold in there. So thank you so
Well,
much
good.
for that.
Well,
But
mate, it was lovely to chat to you, and it's been too long. Hopefully, we can do it again, and
yeah,
when all of this craziness passes, and I can get myself back to Oz, it'd be great to
yeah.
go for a game of pool and a couple of nice beers
Geez,
or
we didn't
whatever.
even mention that in the podcast, but Dan and I used to live in the pool room and be
Yeah,
so late to some classes because we had to finish a game, But
no, but our game's improved, so that was good.
okay, well, stay on the line. I'm gonna stop the recording, but stay on the line for a second, yeah, Dan. But thank you so much
No
for your time.
worries. Yeah,
All right,
thanks, Bad. No worries.
catches.